Former Commando Heston Russell is using his platform as a veteran mistreated by the ABC to launch his own campaign to support returning servicemen and women. Heston Russell, thank you so much for your time. Now, tell me how this Veterans Protection Act would work.
Well, g'day, Sharri. So we're calling for legislation in the form of a Veterans Protection Act to basically require any accusations or allegations arising from combat operations to be required to be tested in criminal court beyond reasonable doubt. And this is drawing from the experiences of the last 3 years post the fallout from the Brereton Report and the failed handling of that, where thousands of Special Forces veterans have been tarred with the same brush, where people like myself and Ben Roberts-Smith have had to take defamation proceedings against people like the ABC and their disinformation campaign, as opposed to being afforded due process and the presumption of innocence on some of the most sensitive topics and sensitive accusations at a time where Afghanistan is controlled by the Taliban. There's real-world threats to our families and to our livelihood. So all that we're asking for is that due process and presumption of innocence through the form of a Veterans Protection Act. And over the weekend, I launched a survey so people can go to hestonrussell.com/veterans and say if they are for this or against this. And I'll go down to Canberra at the end of this month to plead that case.
What happened to you was obviously shocking. What emerged in court is that the ABC investigations unit had no evidence to substantiate any of the claims against you. That's why you've won so thoroughly. But, you know, what if there are other journalists who do have evidence to back up their allegations of war crimes against an individual?
Well, absolutely. And look, you've seen the case in the Ben Roberts-Smith case where the court has found on the balance of probabilities, not beyond reasonable doubt, that there is potentially war crimes there, but he hasn't been charged. And this threshold of evidence must be reached in a criminal court. So any journalist that thinks they have this credible evidence, there's the outlets, including the Office of the Special Investigator, where it can go and be tested against the rules of evidence beyond reasonable doubt for charges and convictions to happen. What is happening at the moment is those who want to be able to publish without it being tested in criminal court are being able to do that. The only result from the Ben Roberts-Smith case is that 2 journalists can publish books. He hasn't been charged, let alone convicted.
So you're saying journalists shouldn't be able to publish war crimes at all, or just shouldn't be able to name the people that they're reporting on, unless they've been charged?
Yes, they should not be able to name until they've been convicted, I would push. And that instead of accusing, for instance, November Platoon or the 2nd Commando Regiment, it should be reported that it's the Department of Defence. And what's been missing throughout all of this is the Department of Defence stepping up to support their former employees. And instead you've had 44 men from November Platoon being tarred with the same brush, 3,500 people from the Special Operations Task Group being tarred with the same brush. And some of the stories and impacts that's had on the livelihoods of them and their families means that we need legislation to better protect them going forward.
Heston, I want to ask you as well about what we saw on the weekend. It was Remembrance Day on Saturday. We saw a memorial dedicated to those who gave their lives in service of this country during World War I being desecrated by pro-Palestinian protesters. How did that upset you when you saw that?
Yeah, I was disgusted by that. And you probably saw I took to that on my social media as well. I was disgusted by that. I was disgusted by politicians who chose to select to politically grandstand on the back of, you know, what is Remembrance Day, remembering the lives lost by all servicemen and women in all wars and conflicts since World War I, to promote their support for Palestine or anyone other than Australian veterans. And I cannot believe that we're at that place in Australia where either one, our politicians don't understand that, or two, we allow actions like the desecration of that memorial to occur. And I can tell you, speaking with many other veterans on Remembrance Day, the common conversation is this is not the Australia I serve to support. And for me, that is a large part of why we're doing things like this legislation, because that sends shockwaves through, you know, the memorable part of my service and the service of others.
You fought for freedom of speech, but not for the freedom to hate and to incite violence.
Absolutely.
Heston Russell, thank you so much for your time.